Hello everyone, this is Tactical Itch here and welcome to another episode of Total War Warhammer 2 online multiplayer. Thanks to Hammond Fear that sent in a replay, today we'll have a Wood Elf versus Dawi matchup. And traditionally, this is a very unfavored matchup for the Wood Elves. But bizarrely, we have a couple rather off-meta builds here. Over for the Wood Elf side, we have a bunch of Eternal Gods surrounding 3 ranks deep of Treekins, one of them the Firebark Elders. We have a Wraith of the Frozen Heart as well as some Dryads. As for the far end over here, we have Orion leading the way with a bunch of Wild Riders with shields hiding in the bushes, while the one lone Waystalker is here probably trying to scout out the area, aiming downside right at the formation of the Dawi. As for spellcasting department, a Branch Wraith with Earthblood, Pendulum, and Wither. As for the Dawi forces, we have also an off-meta build here with 3 Longbeards holding the line. There is a Iron Drake unit at the back and 3 Rangers with great weapons. Normally you'd only see Rangers for their shields and cheap crossbow fire, but over here great weapons, armor-piercing variant. Assuming this build is pretty much designed to counter tree spams and maybe dragons. 2 Bolt Throwers and 1 Goblobber. In the skies we have a couple Gyrocopters, and on the flanks we have a couple Slayer unit. Leading the way we have the White Dwarf. Coming in with Flash Bomb, Grombrindle has no fear, and Foe Seeker. No Grombrindle's axe whatsoever, so that's basically it for the army builds. Let's get the battle started. Right at the beginning of the battle, Waystalker just shooting down the Dwarven formations, but being alone in the front line, he's probably just wandering around trying to pick off whatever targets he can, while the Goblobbers are now shooting into the Eternal Gods, doing really precise rock lobbing damage. Now, let's do a little bit fast forward, as this will only be a push and artillery shooting. Not much happening as the Eternal Gods taking massive damage from the Goblins bound on rocks, and Bolt Throwers shutting down the Treekin already down to half health. These guys are taking some massive damage. But yeah, other than that, the Dryads emerging from tree line, catching these Bolt Throwers out of surprise. An earlier Pendulum went down over here, and assuming the Dwarven player just wasn't having his attention over here and didn't dodge, taking some massive damage on these Longbeards, while this one Longbeard unit holding a bunch of Eternal Gods in place, allowing these Gyrocopters to shoot them down with their steam guns. Arrows of Kernels came down from the Waystalker earlier, but failed to take down any entities of these Gyros, so not quite successful attempt to kill off the Gyrocopters, and other than the Waystalker, there's not much he can do to kill off the Gyros. And maybe Orion's spears, but he's circling around from the back with these Wild Riders, dropping down some bound spells on the artillery crew, failing to kill any of them. I feel like it would have been better to just dump them on top of some Rangers or even Longbeards. A Pendulum went down the line, but this time the Dwarven player notices it and sent their Rangers forward, while the Longbeard's not quite in the line of shot from the Pendulum, so not taking too much damage, especially with the magic resistance. While at the back, the artillery crew are now truly shut down by this one single Wild Rider charge. Devastating. Especially when you don't have armor, which is the case for these Bolt Thrower crew. And over here, just these Rangers are in a staring contest against the Elven units over here. So after a couple volleys of axes, the Treekin took some massive damage. Bombs were dropped but totally missed on the Wraiths, who are now charging into some Slayers. Wraiths of the Frozen Heart, having higher melee attack than your regular Dryads, as well as just being a decent anti-infantry Dryad unit, they should do decent damage on the Slayers due to their lack of armor, but with the steam guns shooting at the back of these Dryads, they are not having a good time whatsoever. So with that kind of pressure, they of course routed, while the Wild Riders, Orion, and they are just wandering around picking off whatever units that are separated from the protection of infantry. And these are some very healthy Eternal Gods going into combat against Slayers and Longbeards, just holding them in place, although a Flash Bomb just dumpstering their melee defense, allowing these Dawi units to do a little bit more effective damage against the Eternal Gods. But bad news is these gyrocopters are still firing from the skies. Now up to almost a chevron on, oh, actually halfway through a chevron on this one. This one still have ways to go, but just really expanding the ammo in the sky like that, it's just really convenient for them. And over here, some Slayers are now get caught in combat getting charged by Wild Riders. They should be able to dismantle the Reindeer Cavalry pretty easily. And in the back, the Rangers and Iron Drakes are now firing in, trying to focus down some key targets like this Branch Brave, taking massive damage from the torpedo shots from the Iron Drakes, as well as the axes from Rangers. So, have an overarching look of the battlefield. Some artillery crew are getting pushed off. The Dawi do have some pretty healthy infantry left, but just not enough to protect all their mobility, especially, not mobility, but range power. The mobility is in the sky, but there's no stopping power whatsoever. They can't really protect them from any infantry pushes, but as long as they can bog down the Branch Braves and whatnot, it should be good. Although this one Waystalker is just charging valiantly into the enemy, but now getting surrounded by Slayers, this is going to be tricky. But okay, things are a little bit weird in this case. He got close enough to these Rangers, right? So these Rangers are in melee distance, and they took out their axes and are now going to melee against the Waystalker. And Waystalker being surrounded by enemy infantry, it's supposed to be a really bad situation for him. But thankfully for the Waystalker, the gyrocopters are firing in and surrounded by lightly armored Dawi units, especially the Slayers. The blast damage from the steam guns are doing huge damage against the Slayers. So Waystalker, by running into an army blob, luring the shots from the steam gun into the Slayers, are able to do massive damage to the Slayers. And now the Slayers are really tattered and no longer considered to be a threat against the Dawi. And the gyrocopter just wasted a bunch of shots into the Waystalker unit. While over here, Wild Riders rushing into combat, trying to shut down these Iron Drakes, but Iron Drakes, having that 125 armor, can hold on for a rather long time, even with the high weapon strength, high charge bonus of these Reindeer Cavalry, simply because the damage just don't go through. Now with gyrocopters desperately charging into combat yet again after the previous replay, yeah, things are actually getting rather desperate for the Dawi. As I said over here, Rangers getting pushed off by Firebark Elders, although they are not right now held in place by the gyrocopters, and axes are flowing into the backs of these Firebark Elders. If these Firebark Elders just ignore the gyrocopters, they should be able to catch these Rangers who are standing still and firing, while in the middle, Grombrindle doing a massive damage to Orion with his axe. Right now, it is a rather bad idea for Orion to engage against Grombrindle, because being a lone duelist, Grombrindle with 70 attack can easily hack through the 40 defense of Orion. And being an anti-large specialist, Orion doesn't really want to fight against Grombrindle. Instead, he will want to just charge around, using his speed to recharge units, and allowing the chaff to just bog down Grombrindle and do the damage, or just tire him out instead. And in the middle is the desperate pocket of Dawi combat right now. Really messy with the unit flag. So over here, just a bunch of gyrocopters supported by Slayers. Oh, Slayers are all dead, I think. Yep, Slayers are pretty much dead, with only Longbeards in the blob, fending off the attack from the Firebark Elders. They're basically surrounded and fleeing right now. And especially after that Orion recharge. Now on the far side, Rangers are now getting pushed off by the Firebark Elders, as gyrocopters who are trying to tie down the Firebark Elders return to the main blob. Grombrindo, being the foot character he is, just slowly sauntered into the melee fight again, but now just left alone outside the blob. And yeah, things are looking rather bare bones for the Dwarves, as they still have some ranged units, but Orion can easily just charge around, shake off the attempts of the Dowie to block him down, and just finish off the ranged units. And in the middle, as you can see here, the gyrocopters are already wavering with a surround of a bunch of terrifying trees and spearmen. While Grombrindo desperately trying to swing his axe to hack down the moving trees, but things are not looking too bright. The Rangers managed to throw in a couple volleys of axes on Treekins, routing one unit off, but right now Orion is setting his sight on these Rangers, chasing him down with his hoofed legs, pretty long too. So with the short little legs of the Dowie, no matter how hard they pump those dolphin legs, it's not gonna matter. 55 speed against 33. Things are not looking good for the Dwarves whatsoever. Some gyrocopters came back and tried to charge the Treekin, but the main thing is Orion. He's just way too fast, and he's a large single entity, so you can't really block him down with gyrocopters, as he can just circle around. And now he's charging straight into the Rangers. He's now hacking them apart, throwing his spears, shish kebabbing them, and the whole blob of Dowie just basically broke and flee. And at this point, it's just all down to the White Dwarf trying to cut down whatever unit that the Wood Elves offered, but with Orion still on the table and a bunch of units to support him, this is not going to be an easy task. Yes, White Dwarf is very healthy, but don't forget about Orion's ability, actually item, the Cloak of Isha. Let's look at here. Cloak of Isha, giving him that 20% damage resistance while providing 8 hit points heals per second. Orion can just recharge Grombrindo into combat. And Grombrindo, being a single entity footlord, he can't really do much about it, as he is slow and he can be easily tied down by infantry. As you can see here, Orion just ran away, simply, right after backstabbing Grombrindo, and the other elven units are now catching up, charging Grombrindo in the rear and at the back. And while the whole time Orion is just sitting at the back, resting, waiting for a perfect timing to recharge Grombrindo to death. And Asteroid Spears on these Eternal Gods are perfect for punching through armors like the Dowie. They are more anti-large specialist tools, but if they get us around like this on Grombrindo, they will have a hell of a time just slowly poking him to death, as the Treekins are now taking damage from Grombrindo's axe. And even the Branch Rave is now coming in for some share of his Dowie meat and using that vengeful fist of branches and twigs. He punched him, the Branch Rave, she punched Grombrindo at the back and just ran away again. Blocked down by elven support units, Grombrindo has no way to escape this, and it's just a matter of psycho charging to his death. So let's do a little bit of fast forwarding, as Grombrindo is now slowly dragged down by the Wood Elf infantry, now with some recharging from the characters of the Wood Elves, as well as these Eternal Gods. Grombrindo is breaking in terms of HP, and that's the end of the White Dwarf. So before we look into the unit performances, I would like to thank you for watching the replay. If you do like it and enjoy it, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, as I'll be uploading regularly on topics about tips and strategies for multiplayer, general battle replays, or some wild army builds. And yeah, so be sure to subscribe to get updated on the latest Total War Warhammer content. Now, with that out of the way, let's go into the army performances. For the Wood Elf army, we have Orion being an absolute champ here, just using his spears to throw at enemies and recharging, or just simply charging key targets, routing them, doing that massive armor-piercing damage. Also, his spells just bombarding his enemies, not the best placements in some cases, but definitely doing decent damage, and every little bit counts. Waystalker, surprisingly good in this game. First of all, 101 kills with his shots and melee combat. Like, normally, Waystalkers, you want them to snipe out important targets, and they're not going to get too many kills, but I assume with some nicely placed arrows of Kernus, managed to kill off some bunch of Dawi infantry. I probably have missed that, but that's what I assume. And also with some really nice bait to bait in the friendly fire from the gyrocopters, definitely did some solid job to carry his weight here, and also part of the teams. As for the infantry, as expected, absolutely trashed by the Dawi ones, except this one Eternal God who actually earned back their value, but mostly Eternal Guards will not earn back their value against the Dawi. This time they got smashed by Goblobbers, and more often than not, there will be blasting charges just shredding them with those flame and fury. As for the Dryads over here, this one also got smashed. Treekin not doing too many damage here. Mostly they took a bunch of axes to their face, and also their main role is more of tanking out damage instead of dishing them out, allowing probably these Eternal Gods to surround Grombrindle at the back, dishing out that important backstab damage. Of course, Wild Riders with shields here today, without a lot of artillery to threaten them or rangers to threaten them, actually managed to sneak into the back line and trash the artillery crew of the Dawi. So overall, pretty good stuff for the Dawi player. Even the Branch Wraith, normally not a really good pick against the Dawi due to their magical attack, earned back their worth. Probably due to some nice placements of Pendulum and also recharging Grombrindle in the end. As for the Dawi player, Grombrindle being a solid character, he has absolutely carried their army this time, but the Longbeards not quite. Just trying to hold the enemy in place, they probably should have just saved up the chevrons, just cut out the Longbeards for a few more Dwarven warriors, simply because they just do not have enough manpower to hold the line against the Wood Elf onslaught. Rangers with great weapons did surprisingly well this time due to the lack of arrows from the Wood Elf player, but the Iron Drakes kind of flopped here, not quite earning the value they worth, especially with 3 chevrons, while the artillery crew got shut down early by the Wild Riders. Yes, the Wild Riders. Gyrocopters did some really solid work. Thanks to the lack of archers, they're not focused down, and with the lightly armored infantry of the Wood Elves, their steam guns can do some really effective blast damage. So that's basically it for today's replay. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for watching. Tactical Itch signing out, and I'll see you in the next one.